Hello and welcome to our 2020 iFarmiVote video series. Today I'm joined by Karen Handel, Republican candidate for Georgia's 6th Congressional District. Welcome, Karen. Thank you for joining me here today.
Happy to be here, Katie. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. Before we kick off our discussion, I want to remind our audience that as a nonpartisan organization, Georgia Farm Bureau cannot and will not tell our members how to vote. Instead, our hope is that this video series, paired with additional resources on our iFarmiVote campaign website, will serve as a valuable resource for our members and the greater agricultural community, and will allow for them to make informed decisions as they head to the polls this fall. This video series will feature our congressional candidates, and we have made the same opportunity available to each and every individual pursuing office in those 14 districts. Ms. Handel, thank you again for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today and for allowing us to get to know you a little bit better. Let's get started.
And please call me Karen.
Okay, great. First off, let's get to know you. Could you tell me a little bit about where you're from, your background, your education, that sort of thing?
My husband Steve and I have lived in the 6th District in North Metro Atlanta for over 25 years. We actually live in the city of Roswell. I went to college at night. I have a little bit of an unusual background for someone who has served in Congress and is running for Congress. I left home when I was just 17 and finished up high school, and then went immediately out into the workforce. And it's been a privilege to serve in Congress and have the opportunity to work with the Farm Bureau and leaders in the ag sector during my time in Congress.
Great. Well, as you mentioned, you've been in Congress before. Do you currently hold a public office? And in addition to Congress, you do not?
Okay. I do not. I'm running for Congress in Georgia's 6th Congressional District.
And are there any other public offices you've held besides your previous seat?
Yes. Prior to being in Congress, I was Georgia's first elected Republican Secretary of State, where I was able to implement photo ID for our elections process and really modernize the Secretary of State's office to get business licenses out to people who needed them so they could get to work much more their professional licenses quickly. And then prior to that, I was County Commission Chairman for Fulton County. And before that, I was in the private sector. And I also was Governor Sonny Perdue's Deputy Chief of Staff for about 8 months before the chairman's seat opened up on Fulton County Commission.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. As the state's largest and strongest voluntary ag organization, Georgia Farm Bureau was founded back in 1937 to be a united voice for farmers in both the legislative arenas in Atlanta and in DC. That being said, it's pretty obvious that agriculture is the lifeblood of our organization and the livelihood of many of our members. So let's kick off with that. What do you think are 3 of the greatest issues that are currently facing Georgia agriculture?
Well, I think most pressing right now in this moment is economic recovery and getting back to some semblance of normalcy for the supply chain in the aftermath of COVID and as we're still fighting COVID, but also recovery from the economic impact of the trade situation, and also, frankly, the hurricane, where we know many in the ag community are still trying to pivot from that incredible devastation. And you really kind of roll up into that, making sure that we continue with the USDA's COVID assistance program for farmers, that we get the FEMA dollars, the disaster FEMA dollars rolling out into the hands of those who really need it. It took way too long for those dollars to get where they needed to be post the hurricane. And same is really happening post or during as we're trying to deal with COVID and help those in the ag community there. And also part of economic recovery is the infrastructure, and again, to that supply chain. And then I really view agriculture innovation, if you will, as part of that economic recovery, so that we make sure that farming and the food supply is as modern as possible to make sure we're protecting that.
Awesome. Thank you. What is a passion project that you may currently have or could envision happening if elected to Congress that would have an impact on the state and rural Georgia and or agriculture?
So two things. One, as you know, when we did in 2018, when we passed the tax cut bill, we were able to get some relief on the estate tax. We need to continue working on that to have a full permanent repeal of that estate tax, which so disproportionately affects many in the farm community and the ag community. And then secondly, one issue that I worked on was a guest worker program. And of all the big bills that we worked on, that was one that it was such a disappointment that we couldn't get that across the finish line. We really need to come back and address that for workforce needs today and down the road for the agriculture community, and having a practical, workable guest worker program where everyone can be on the same legal playing field is really important to our ag sector. And there's a lot of other things, broadband,
Right.
lots of other issues that we need to deal with, but I think those are two that we have a real immediate opportunity.
Right. You mentioned broadband. If elected, what will you do to improve rural access to things such as broadband, healthcare, government services, et cetera, education, that sort of thing for Georgians?
Yeah, so those are all issues affecting us, particularly in the rural areas. And I think one of the most important things that I can do to be a positive influence on that issue is, as I'm working to represent the people of the 6th District, to remember that there's also the issues of the state, and to be sure that I'm working closely with leaders like Mr. Duval and other leaders from the ag sector through the Farm Bureau, my good friend Austin Scott, making sure that as we're looking at solutions, that my filter, yes, is for the 6th District, but that I also have a bigger perspective on how these solutions are going to affect our rural communities.
Right.
And one specific area would be strengthening our community health centers. They are strategically located across our state, and I think that's such a incredible asset as we look to have healthcare access and lower healthcare costs.
Before I let you go, we're going to wrap up with a few fun questions for our audience, just to kind of get to know you and your ag perspective a little bit better. First of all, what is your favorite Georgia grown commodity?
Tomatoes. It is Cairo tomato time right now, and in probably about 3 weeks, it'll be Raven Gap tomatoes. I go to our little local farmers market, Nell's, right by our house, and he knows when the tomatoes are out, the first thing I ask is, where are these tomatoes from? Because I got to have my really good mater sandwich.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I was expecting something a little more, peaches or blueberries, but I like that answer. It's different.
I am all about the maters.
Yeah.
I
That's
eat
great.
an entire basket of them every week, and my husband doesn't really eat tomatoes, so that's like 8 tomatoes that one girl eats in a week.
Well, I'm the person who takes my tomatoes off of everything. So if we ever eat lunch, I'll share it with you. We're fortunate to have an abundance of Georgia grown commodities, like we mentioned. But speaking of those commodities, I have one last question, which is kind of a taboo topic in Georgia ag. Would you pronounce it pecan or pecan?
I'm actually pecan. I don't know where it came from, but that's how I say it, pecan. I've been teased before about it.
Well, see, I grew up a pecan girl, but almost everyone I work with says pecan and insists it's pecan. So to each his own. I may be in the minority there. You may have it right. Well, thanks again for, go ahead.
It's been a pleasure to join you. I appreciate it so much.
Of course. Well, thank you for visiting with me. The iFarmiVote initiative, like I mentioned, it goes beyond our active farmers in the state. And like you mentioned, you're in a more metro district, but I mean, you can see it yourself that ag does impact the people in your district as well. And as an elected official, it's important to be able to work not only for the community you live in, but for the better of Georgia. So I really appreciate you understanding that and supporting our #1 industry. So thanks again for joining us, and good luck the rest of your campaign.